Hello, I'm Jane Sullivan and I'm an author. This book is Storytime and the subtitle is Growing Up with Books, and it is published by Ventura Press, and I will tell you something about how it came to be. It's my third book, it's my first non-fiction book, and it came about because I was interested in thinking about my childhood and the books I read then. And I've spent a lot of time in my life writing about books for newspapers and so on, and reading books, and I've read some wonderful, fabulous classics that we all know and love. But the thing that always puzzled me is, why is it that in my mind Enid Blyton is so much more important than Tolstoy or Shakespeare or George Eliot? And what was it about these writers I read when I was very young that made such an extraordinary impression on me that stays with me still? Well, I thought what I'd do is I'd make a list of about 12 or 13 of the books that had most impact on me between the ages of 7 and 11. And then I'd go back and read them again. First of all, I'd record my own memories of when reading those books. Then I'd go back and read them again. And I'd try and work out what it was that was so important about those books to me. And so off I went on this great voyage of discovery, and it was very exciting and often quite puzzling and surprising and sometimes quite disturbing what I found out, both about the books I read and also about myself. I tried to come up with a list of the things that mattered most to me in reading, and they were not the things I thought that mattered. I was not terribly impressed by beautiful writing, or the sort of things that I enjoy now as a reader were not quite the same sort of things I enjoyed as a child. I loved a story that absorbed me and that I could identify with the characters, even though they were nothing like me. It means identifying with little animals, for example, or boys. There were very few books about girls. That was something I noticed. And the differences I noticed also were that some books I read again and absolutely loved, no problem at all. Other books I read and I had problems with them because I couldn't understand why I'd loved them in the first place. And I have to come back to Enid Blyton again. When I was reading Enid, I read Enid Blyton, one of her books that's called The Adventure Books. There's a whole series of those. And I reread a book called The Castle of Adventure, which I had particularly fond memories of. And I was surprised to find that it was awful. And from the first page on, I couldn't bear reading it. And there were 200 of these pages to get through. So I ploughed through them dutifully, but all the way through my little inner critic was shrieking, no, this is terrible. And why are the girls making all the sandwiches and the boys are doing the most interesting stuff and leaving the girls behind? And then when something awful happens, the girls are the ones that scream and the boys are the ones who are brave, and a whole lot of problems like that. Why are they getting in and out of suits of armour so quickly? Nobody can do that. So I had to go back and think, well, there's something about Enid Blyton that I don't appreciate now, but I did enormously appreciate at the time, and so did every other kid I knew. We were all mad for Enid Blyton, and I had to work out what that was. And I think there were a combination of things. She got us into an adventure, and that was what we all wanted as readers. We all thought our lives were very boring and we wanted to go somewhere very exciting, but not too exciting. We didn't want to be in an adventure ourselves. We wanted to read about other kids like us having adventures. We wanted to get away from parents. That was another important thing. Enid Blyton kids never seemed to have their parents around. We wanted to be with animals because animals were fun and important. And we just wanted to really have fun and be excited and be a little bit afraid. And Enid Blyton did all that in spades for us. So that's why we loved her books. Some of the others I loved were, I'll have a little look to remind myself, Alice in Wonderland, Winnie the Pooh, the Moomin family, who were invented by a Finnish writer. There was a series of comic books called The Silent Three, which I loved as a kid. Little Women, I didn't like. And when I thought I'd better read a book I didn't like, and I'll be fair, because this is supposed to be the great classic of children's literature. Everyone's supposed to love this. It's supposed to be a wonderful role model for girls, particularly if they want to be writers, as the character of Jo was a very young writer. I read this again. I still didn't like it. I hated all the moralising. I did admire Louisa May Alcott, the author, because I thought she had considerable odds to work against, and I had a lot of sympathy for her. But I think the book just doesn't do it for me still. And I realised that the reason why I didn't like the book was, instead of identifying with Jo, the budding writer, who nearly every little girl does, I saw her as a rival. And I thought, why is she being so successful? I'm having such trouble. At the age of 9, I haven't had anything published. What's wrong with me? So I had very unrealistic expectations, I think, and a very antagonistic attitude to girls I thought were doing better than me. I think I've got over that now. I very much support other women, but at that time it was not the way. Other books I loved were The Wind in the Willows. On rereading, I think that was my favourite book still. I just adored that book, even though it's not very politically correct, because the ruling class beat the workers when Mr. Toad and his allies kicked the Stoats and Weasels out of his ancestral home. There was a writer called E. Nesbit, who was very popular when I was young, a writer from the early 20th century. And again, I enjoyed her books, reading them again, and her particular portrayal of magic was very effective to me. The Magic Pudding was the one Australian book I read. I grew up in England, so I didn't read many Australian books, but I loved The Magic Pudding. I loved the fact that it was violent, and I could dig all this vicarious violence and this horrible language and this biffing and bashing and sockdolages on the muzzles, whatever they were. I loved that book, and I loved it again when I read it, and I realised it was a fantastic outlet for all my very violent impulses, because we had them as children, the girls too. And I also loved The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, which was a book by C.S. Lewis, one of the Narnia books. I absolutely devoured the Narnia books as a kid, and it was very exciting to read them again, even though I have to say C.S. Lewis is a terrible reactionary in lots of ways. His invention of the magic world was quite superb and still very compelling. And what else? I had a little pornography book. Well, actually, it's quite a big pornography book when I was little. When I say pornography, I don't mean sex, I mean horror. And this book was called Great Tales of Terror and the Supernatural. And I hid it under my bed. It was my parents' book. They weren't supposed to know I had it. And I devoured all these stories, and I scared myself rigid. And I read them again, and most of them weren't very scary, I have to say. Some of them, they were mixed bags. Some of them were very good, and some were not so good. But there was one story that still terrified me. And it was a story about a little boy who drifts into a strange world where he's totally absorbed with snow. It's called Silent Snow, Secret Snow. And I think it's a portrait of an autistic boy looking at it now. But of course, I knew nothing about that then, and I'm not even sure the writer knew about it, but it has that feel about it. And I was terrified that I was going to go that way myself. I was very introverted as a child. I loved to go off and dream. I thought, I'm going to fall into this terrible trap and be lost in the snow and just sink away to nothing. And that really, really scared me. And still, when I read it, for about half an hour, I felt the fear all over again. So that was a fantastic experience. And the final book I read was Alan Garner's The Weird Stone of Brisingamen. He's a very well-known English writer of fantasy, and again I thought that was a fantastic adventure. It got me into the most impressive part of it for me was the children, not the monsters and the creatures from the other world, but the fact that they go down underground into old mine shafts, and they get trapped in these mine shafts and they have to find their way out. And that was one of the most thrilling things I had ever read. The claustrophobia was so intense, and I really felt like I was being sandwiched between miles of rock myself. So to sum up, I had the most enthralling journey. I found out that I was actually a braver kid than I thought I'd been. I thought of myself as a very shy, introverted, timid child who escaped into the world of books, and that was true. But I also had a lot of agency in this. I could take charge of these books and twist them to my own wishes, if you like. So okay, there were hardly any girls I wanted to identify with. Never mind, I'd identify with the boys, or I'd identify with the animals. And that was my way through this fact that all these books were decidedly sexist, racist, although as a white girl that didn't affect me so much, but the sexism did. And it wasn't a problem because I wouldn't be a girl, I'd be somebody else. And that was enormously empowering and exciting. So obviously books are very different. The books kids read now are very different from the books I read when I was growing up. But I think a lot of what I found out still applies now. And I would so encourage parents to get their children to read, because it is such an extraordinary journey that they will go on. They will never regret it. They will find something that will be important to them all their lives. And when I've been promoting this book, everyone comes up to me and says, oh, I've got to tell you about this book that I read when I was a child. And it's nearly always something I haven't written about at all, but it doesn't matter. It's something that is important to them. The other thing I should mention is that I do have contributions from other very generous writers in this book who've written about their own experience of reading stories when they're young. And there's a whole lot of these readers who put in their own little comments. So I have to thank them, and I've been very grateful to their... It sort of broadened out the whole thing, I think. So it's not just my recollections, it's others. So altogether, I was just delighted when this book was published. I didn't get much chance to promote it, unfortunately, because it came out in the end of 2019, and then, of course, COVID hit. So all the promotional events I had were cancelled. So I've done what I could, but I think it's been languishing a little. So if I'm hoping it's going to be one of those sleeper books that people will pick up on and enjoy and discover now if they didn't the first time round. I've been writing a long time. I'm a journalist, and so I've been writing really all my working life. And at some stage I decided I wanted to do something a bit more creative, and I have written 2 novels, and this, I'll hold them both up at once. The White Star was my first novel, and that was published with Penguin, and it was, I suppose I would call a psychological thriller. And my second novel is Little People, and that's a historical novel, and it's based on a true story of some we'd have to call them midgets, though that's not the correct term now, some dwarfs or midgets who came to Australia and did a tour of Australia in 1870. And I made up a story about their visit to this country. And they were treated like rock stars. They were feted everywhere. Crowds came out to see them. There were traffic jams of carts in the street. So I thought this was an extraordinary story, and I hadn't seen it told anywhere else before. They just sort of disappeared from view. So I picked up on it and made up a lot of things to go with the actual factual story. So these 2 books are unfortunately not available in bookshops anymore because they came out a long time ago, but I think people could still find them online if they want to have a look. When I was a kid, I really wanted to write, and I thought, but how am I going to do it in a way that will earn me money? And I thought, well, the best way will probably be to write for the newspapers. So that's what I've done. And I've done many, many jobs. I've worked first of all in England, and then I came to Australia in 1979, and I worked mainly for The Age on staff and did a lot of different editing jobs and writing jobs and worked overseas. And in the last few years, I've been writing a column called Turning Pages, which appears in The Age and also in the Sydney Morning Herald on Saturdays. And that's all about books and writing. That's become my sort of specialist subject, if you like. So that's one thing I do, and that basically earns me money. The other kind of writing I do is this more exploratory work which interests me personally. So that's fiction and also non-fiction in the form of Storytime, which falls into that genre they call bibliomemoir. It's a story about books and also about myself. So that's resulted in some published books, and I think it's really where my heart lies. It's what I'm most interested in doing and what I love doing. Although it's very difficult sometimes and very much a challenge, I still feel that overall that's what I really want to do. But I also love journalism, and that's been good to me in terms of giving me an income, so I'll keep on doing that as well if I can somehow balance the two. So I've been working at home for some years anyway. I worked as a staff person on The Age for many years, and now I'm working as a freelance. So I've been working at home even before COVID started, so that wasn't so hard. What is a bit more difficult is that there are less opportunities for freelance writers now because the advertisements have gone down, the newspaper space has shrunk very considerably, and there's my column, for example, is now running fortnightly instead of weekly, and other outlets I've had have just faded away, sadly, so my income's gone down and my opportunities have gone down, and I think that's true for most freelance writers, unfortunately. On the other hand, it has given me more time to work on my own stuff as I think of it, so I have appreciated the chance to be creative, and even though it's been a stressful, anxious time, as it has for everyone, I've had that outlet, if you like. I can go into my own world and explore my own world, and I've been very grateful for that. It's helped me a lot through COVID. It's got me through that lockdown and everything. I would have to cheat a bit and tell you about 2021 because I've just read Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro, which I thought is the most stunning book. I think it's possibly his best, and that's saying a lot considering what he's written before. And it's very simple, very straightforward, but it goes into very deep emotional territory without getting sentimental, and I found it very, very moving. So I think that most recently is my most outstanding book. Going back a bit, last year I read Colin McCann's book, A Paragon, and I thought that was a very wonderful read, and I enormously enjoyed that. Quite a different book from Ishiguro's, very fragmented. It's all made up of fragments, but it all comes together somehow. It seems to work. So I think those two books will probably be my most outstanding reads. But I've read so many, and I've read some fantastic Australian writers too. Too many to mention, really. But it's been a good year for reading as well. Well, I'm working on another bibliomemoir, which is about the books I read as a teenager. So it's moving up from the childhood books, and I think it's going to be very different. It feels different to me. It's more about sex, romance and relationships, which were, of course, as a teenager, the things that most interested me. And it's already I'm making some discoveries in some of the books. I'm going back to Jane Eyre, Gone with the Wind, Rebecca, and a few others. I think it's going to be, it's an interesting journey all over again, but quite different from the first one. I'm also working on a historical murder mystery, which was prompted by some of the things I discovered when I was writing Little People, because it's set in Melbourne in the same sort of period, late 1860s, and that's been a long labour. That's been going for a long time, so I hope one of these days it'll be finished. Yeah, so plenty to keep me busy. Pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Yes, it's lovely to talk about my work. Yeah.